No.
I'm seeing a BRB. Be right back.
Hold on. Let's go ahead and do something real quick. Remove. Okay, hide.
Hey,
bang!
There we go. Okay. Love
Look at
that. Hey, I like it.
You
representing Arizona well. Look at you
getting after it. Hey, Randy, haven't talked to you in a while. How are you?
Doing good, Mr. Brent Nichols, stirrer of pots. I feel like he's gonna get.
I decided to stand today because it's kind of my power position when I'm ready to close and get stuff done. And then you did the same thing. So let's go. Let's close.
Let's close. We're getting closer, right?
Yeah, let's spend 15 seconds acting like it was a great webinar that we just came off of, and there's lots to talk about. Also, looking forward to hearing how AFA was.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to do a webinar about phase ones, anyways. Which is surprising. Not even one.
What's your biggest question that you have, like that you're like, I'm gonna have to make it up because I can't figure it out?
Well, I don't have to make it up yet because I got an email out to AFWERX, but I think today, as it stands, it's the NIST requirements. So for those companies that have already done that 2, 3, 4 hour questionnaire,
right?
The way I'm reading it, and I'm probably getting into the
we get through it. We get through it in 15 minutes. I don't know if you must be doing it right.
The way I'm reading it is it's unclear, basically, on if you've never done it. Okay, do you do the online version or just the version that link sends you to? There's a template in there, Appendix A. That's the template. Do you just fill that out and then submit that as part of the proposal along with within PIEE? Don't ask me what the acronym stands for, but so it's unclear whether or not what's clear is that that's a requirement at time of proposal submission. That's what's very clear, and that's different this round. So that's my biggest thing is, okay, even for those companies that have done it as well, do they need to do this version as found in Appendix A? That's the part where it's a little unclear to me, but got a question out. In fact, I actually just checked DSIP this morning to see if anyone posted that question online. Shoot, I might just go and do that so the world can see what the response is. I have a feeling AFWERX will appreciate that anyways. The community, I'm sure, would appreciate it. So
have they been answering questions on DSIP?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. That says something about how I've been tapped in. I've been heads down. We got things after it. Now traditionally, they I feel like they hadn't done it as responded as much because they did have the webinar. So
true. That's true.
And so what was less necessary to happen in there. So that's actually a really good idea. That's a good point. They did do a big shakeup to the supplemental documents. Like the Air Force Open Topic's been notorious for an unreal amount of supplemental documents. Like, what do you actually need? And for anyone who's gone through the award process, full well, no matter what you submit, they're going to ask you for it again. Anyway, so but no, you're hitting something we talked about on our team. It was not only the NIST, but for STTR allocation of rights was also another one where it's in, and don't quote me on it exactly, but in solicitations past, the STTR allocation of rights is basically, hey, not required at the time of proposal, but it is required at the time of award. As opposed to now the language, I believe it says, John and our team pointed out, it says shall. It shall be done. And so especially for people working with big institutions who it's quite frankly a pain in the neck. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So no, that's good. That I think the looming question that I have is how as we've watched over the past 2 years, and they've like slowly began to integrate space and Space Force. They kind of started out as, okay, Space Force is here. It's Space Force and Air Force, and trying to create an understanding of train going by. Guys, Space Force is part of the Department of the Air Force, and so that's where that DAF acronym had greater meaning. And then Space Force was stood up, and they had a little bit more integration with that. And then all the way up until last round when they said you actually have to select your topic, Air Force or Space Force. And now, again, I think John pointed out, he's like, last solicitation, I think the word space was used 42 times. This solicitation was used like 6. So something happened. Well, if the only thing that happened is the way they're communicating is different and everything else remains the same, then I think that remains to be seen. So that's kind of one of the questions I have, especially for clients in our portfolio that have an Air Force and a Space Force application.
Yeah. Well, so let me just pull the thread on that, because are you saying your concern is for your clients in your portfolio that are purely space? Are you concerned about them being like getting a fair shake in there? Like, is it applicable? Is that what your question is? Or
no, but I think it's more of like how you are going to communicate, probably most specifically the defense need. I think even if look, Department of the Air, obviously, maybe there's an argument to be made. I'm overcomplicating it, but the way when we put in there, hey, here's the organizations we're looking at, here's the mission set that we're looking at. I think it's going to be very different if you're going to say, hey, here's Space Force, but Space Force isn't really even being considered, so to speak, as opposed to the Air Force mission. So then I would redirect the language around there. Here's how it impacts the Air Force mission and the Air Force specific organizations, not Department of the Air Force as a whole. So I just think it just changes the way that you communicate to the evaluators, because the other thing is too, if they've taken Space Works has got something up their sleeve and they're going to try to do something, which I don't know if they are, and we're just getting Air Force, not Department of Air Force evaluators and not Space Force evaluators, I think that matters.
It does matter. I looked at it before. I can't remember on the strategic objectives that are highlighted in the RFP. Do they reference Space Force strategic objectives? I'm talking about where you got to pick like, responsibility to organize, train, and equip, blue sky, da 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 da.
And last round, look, I don't know if you can pull it up, but last round they'd broken it out. They had broken Space Force out, and this time they did not.
Right. Yeah. Actually, let me try this. Let me try this share screen. Let me see. I might just totally crash the whole thing.
It's starting. I got to put you on stage.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So this is the SBIR SIBR, the DAF operational imperatives, space order of battle, operationally focused ABMS, moving target engagement, tactical air dominance, resilient basing, global strike, readiness to deploy and fight. So that's.
And I mean, you'll have to trust me on it, but last solicitation.
Oh, no.
It went further and said, hey, here's the ones for space.
No, I 100% I agree. I'm just seeing how they're talking to it here. Do they break it down by Air Force and Space Force? Now, remind me again, Brent.
I'm a little frustrated right now because I feel like you're calling me a liar. Yeah, I came in here and I was prepared to discuss this piece. It's not included in the same way it was, Randall.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I violently agree with you.
But I do think that deserves some sort of answer, because it is going to drive. It should drive to a degree some of your commercialization elements, some of the things you're talking around defense need and where it's targeted. I think it's going to drive the discussion around it a little bit.
Right.
You're not. You seem unconvinced. So
no. What my question is, I can't remember now off the top of my head. Is space order of battle a very Space Force centric operational imperative? I can't recall. In fact, why don't we just go look at the DAF? Where's John when you need him?
Yeah, come on. He's sleeping still. Although he's getting lunch. It's lunchtime over there in this time zone.
Okay. Go to the operational imperative.
I think regardless of whatever the answer is, Randy, the Space Force you got a satellite application or space debris. I think this is still for you, but the way you communicate it is going to be very different.
No. Okay, so I just looked it up, and thank God John's here. He'll keep in line. No, so part of the operational imperatives is space order of battle. So that's not a Space Force specific strategic need. So that's what I was trying to clear up in my mind anyways. So you're right. It's unclear as to how the Space Force plays into this, if they do at all, quite frankly. Right. So if you only have a Space Force capability, the question now is, how will you get a fair shake in this round?
Right. So, I mean, we may not get a clear answer. I know I'm going to shoot a note over, and which I have not done yet, to the P1 box. Just see, but something happened, right? Something happened in the solicitation. There's some intentionality there, and it may have been just say, hey, we want to pull this back a little bit further. It would be a little more general instead of maybe the specifics created chaos last round.
Here's what I will say to kind of button this up, and it's going to sound like I'm probably circling back on what I just said. The operational imperatives do cover Space Force and Air Force. So, and that's according to the Air Force website I'm looking at right now. So if you look at it from that perspective, they're covering down on both Air and Space Force. And the only thing that they are doing is eliminating some of the weirdness in how you pick who directly is the proposal going towards. So that very well could be the answer that AFWERX comes back with. And I think
which I'm okay with, but it just we need an answer because it's different.
Okay. Yeah.
My thoughts.
Yeah.
Got a great meme. John made a great meme.
I saw it.
It's good stuff. Well, hey, this leads to I'd say where we want to spend maybe some of our time today, and this to a degree pulls back a little bit to the basics of how do you win these freaking things? I mean, there's the compliance piece, and we can kind of get in the weeds on that, but I don't think it's helpful. If you have questions, I mean, I know Randy and I and anyone on our team happy to answer it, and we'll probably share a template or two with you. But push come to shove, you understand all the crap that needs to go in there and what the structure is, and how do you win it? And I would argue the most important piece of winning these things is understanding who's evaluating. I can't think of a more important factor. Who's your audience?
Yeah.
And if you think about the specific topics, you have a pretty good insight in terms of who the audience is. You can see the program office that's driving it. You can visualize. I know you and I have been part of these discussions. You can visualize that team sitting around the table talking about, hey, what are we actually going to put in the solicitation? And it gets out there, and you even have a TPOC that's interested in it. That's for specific topics, or maybe just something you see on SAM. Open topic,
right?
None of that.
Totally different.
Totally different. It is literally a blue ocean. There's anything under the sun. They say it over and over and over again. If there's a defense application and you can tell that story, put it in front of us. And then who's going to evaluate it? And just real quickly as we get into it, sometimes we'll end up in these discussions with potential partners or even current partners. Maybe we were unsuccessful in a round, and they're like, well, the Air Force is telling us they don't want it.
Right.
And part of me wants to be like, how about this? You ain't working with us unless, not to be overly pretentious, but like, we don't work with companies that don't have a defense need. So let's start there. You can't make some big grand conclusion because you were unsuccessful in a single phase 1 round. The Air Force the voice of the Air Force is not being spoken out through the results of a phase one proposal on both sides. If you are successful, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a great fit for the DoD. And so anyway, that kind of draws back to this. Well, why is that? Because the evaluators are really tough to pin down. But I know that you and I probably have some good opinions, at least. I'd maybe just start with you. Like, as you're talking through with your partner, with your partners, your team.
Yeah.
Hey, here's who we're talking to. Here's who our audience is. How are you explaining that?
Yeah, good question. Again, we talked about it a while ago. I say keep it at a 10th grade reading level. And again, we're not.
I'm more in like 6th grade, but I'm glad you brought that up early. How dare you? How dare you say that about our warfighting brothers and sisters in there?
You and I were both on the other side of the fence, so we can say this without being demeaning or anything like that, because it's true. And when I say that, when I say a 10th grade reading level, it's not because they're at a 10th grade reading level. It's because the understanding has to be so clear that a 10th grader gets it, when they're reading a slide deck. So, and you got to assume that the person that's evaluating doesn't know anything about your technology or even your industry. You could have a med tech, capability that's about to change the world, but you got a wrench turner, a maintainer guy. God love them, God bless them. They keep the Air Force going for sure, but they know nothing. They may know nothing about medical technology and what's important, what's not important, what the Air Force needs, what it doesn't need, unless what you tell them is compelling. And so that's who you have to write to. You have to write to the person that may not know anything about it, but you have to be able to relate. And I think that's what, like, guys like you and me and John and Charles and, guys on our team, like, we could kind of relate very well within any industry because we've seen enough. So we can relate and we can make those connections. And that's what makes us, I would say, killers in the space. But for the phase one proposal, you've got to write that thing so that, your high school kid is like, holy smokes, that's awesome. I'd love to work for that company.
Well, you have to write to the lowest common denominator, and be quite frank. Yeah, I mean, there are times even when we talk to a potential partner, like you said, we've seen a lot of different technologies. We probably know more than most from a general standpoint. But even still, I'm like, I remember when we first got into this space, and you don't see this term as much anymore, but in the AI ML world is Kubernetes. People talk about Kubernetes. I'm still not convinced it's actually a real word or a real thing, but I think everyone put it in everything. But I'm like, you got to pull this. I felt like Michael Scott, right? It's like, talk to me like I'm a 10th grader. Okay, now talk to me like I'm a 5th grader. And Oscar's saying, okay, your mommy gave you $10 for a lemonade stand.
That's right. Exactly right.
It eventually got there, but the point is that the unknowns around the evaluators are so much so that you got to get to the lowest common denominator. And you gave the example of like biomed and maintenance. Not that maintenance are dummies, right? Because there could be a maintenance application where they'll freaking go nuts because you reverse it. It could be a maintenance application and you got a medical guy reading it.
Yeah.
He'd lose his mind trying to understand the mission impact. Pull back just a little bit further. Why is this happening? And I don't know how clear AFWERX makes this. It becomes obvious over time, but the execution of this, I don't think there's anything like it, not just in the civil world, but just in the federal space where thousands of contracts are being awarded. To be able to execute a program of this size, it's kind of all hands on deck to the point, and I'll break it down a little bit further and you add color where you feel like you need to. But at some point, and they probably already done it for these phase ones, Air Force all and the gal gets hit and everyone says, and everyone gets an email one day and says, hey, would you like to be an AFWERX evaluator?
Right.
And you could apply to B1 and it goes out to everybody from E1 to I'm assuming the general gets it. I suppose he could be I suppose he
Sure.
could be an evaluator as well. But everyone gets it, and you've got a smattering of ranks, backgrounds, and everything else. And they just click the link and they say, "Yeah, I want to be it." And they go through a training to help understand what it is. And so it's a volunteer force.
Right.
In order to execute a program to this size, you don't have people that even really know much about AFWERX.
Yeah.
How do I know this? Because I get text messages from friends and family or whoever that know kind of what we do, and they're like, "Hey, I got this email. Should I do that?" I'm like, "Yeah, hell yeah, it'll be a lot of fun."
Yeah. Right.
But that's how the evaluation force is being, developed, so that when we say you really don't know who you're going to be evaluating, who your evaluator is, AFWERX doesn't even know who it is. They don't know who's going to click that link. They don't know who the bodies are going to be that are going to be looking at it.
I think the big thing is the alignment within the industry, right? Like, okay, if there was some alignment in, say, let's just use the med tech example. Okay, we know somebody from the med group is going to be on this evaluation. Again, for phase one's open topics, that may happen by chance. Probably won't happen though, because the Air Force is so big and does so many different things. So that's the piece, right? The other part I think that's just as important is how much time they're actually going to put on this review, right? So, okay, so you're talking to, let's just use the phrase you use because it's probably true. Lowest common denominator is what you have to write to. But then it's like, okay, is this person going to read absolutely everything in the slide deck? So if it gets, some slides are going to get a little wordy. Okay. At least mine do. You got to tell the story. But then there's going to be some that you just have to have good visuals, and it's got to pop and it's got to have numbers. And it's like, okay, I get that in about 3 minutes. I get what you're trying to tell me in commercialization in, 15 seconds because there's great visuals and graphics. Beautiful. Like I appreciate that because I've got a stack of 20 of these things I got to get through. So it's managing that too. It's like, can I understand what you're trying to sell me as an evaluator? I shoot for like 15 minutes max, right? If I'm reading a proposal and we're doing like an internal review kind of thing, and I'm reading a proposal, I'm like, I have no idea what you're proposing here. Mm-hmm. More than likely, that person who's evaluating is going to have the same impression. And I'm going to give it 15 minutes. If I don't get it, if I don't understand it within 15 minutes, quite frankly, when that first slide after the cover, after the intro, who the company is and proposal title. Okay, second slide. If I don't get what you're trying to do and I have to figure it out as I go through the slides, forget it. So that first, technically second slide needs to be just a home run slide. It's got to tell the story well. It's got to tell everything well. Basically use it as an executive summary. Have a good visual in there. And then, okay, now as an evaluator, I'm excited. Now everything after that is just confirming what I just read and giving me a little bit more information, as opposed to the other way. I've seen this quite a bit where it's like, okay, first, second slide doesn't really tell me anything beside who the company is. I'm figuring out, what are you actually proposing? Okay, slide 10, what are you actually proposing? Slide 25, what are you actually proposing? And I don't really know how to figure that out. So you got to be compelling, you got to be succinct. And, those, to me, we've had a lot of success when we follow that simple format and play it out, give it to somebody like a Brent or a Randy to say, hey, can you just give this 10 minutes? Is it a winner or is it not a winner? And they're, we'll be brutally honest and we'll know the winners and the losers. And then even though there's a human factor, of course, that you can't guarantee anything, but we have a good idea. We'll have a good idea on what is going to be competitive and what's not going to be competitive.
Right. So within that, right? Okay, because I think you're bringing up some good points, but you got technical merit, defense need, and commercialization. And I've never seen anything quite like this in terms of where they're all weighted exactly the same.
Right.
I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. I'm not sure I've got a better way. It's just, that's the way. So going back to your point of like, hey, that first slide, you got to hit him in the mouth. And so I kind of put it in this way: technical merit. What is it? Mm-hmm. What is it? I mean, we can unpack that further if you want, but I think that's it. Do I know what the heck it is? Is it even a possible thing to exist, or do I even understand what it is? Mm-hmm. Defense need is, frankly, what, John, Sorry, that train's loud, isn't it? It's right there. Defense needed is what problem are you solving?
Right.
Simple as that. What problem are you solving? And then the commercialization is there a market for it? Yes or no? And it's funny because when you look at some of these, the way some people like to build these slides, I like to describe our goal as, hey, this needs to be an aesthetically pleasing experience. When they get my deck, I want them to feel good about what they see. And if you get 6-point font everywhere, because on your first slide, you felt like that you needed to talk about the 37 investors you have. And, and there's some recommendations, within there. If you look at old examples and stuff that maybe think that that's important, but it's like, is it important? Because right now, I'd say if you're using a bunch of words to say stuff that isn't telling us what it is, what the problem you're solving is, and whether or not there's a market for it, then it needs to go. It needs to be gone. And it's because going back to, we got the lowest common denominator, and I think you're being generous with 15 minutes. I think you get about 3 minutes.
It could be true.
Get them hooked in, right? Because if you don't get them hooked in right out the gate, they're going to flip through all your slides and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
No way. You can start doing some math. Okay, let's say there's 1,400 proposals. There's 30 evaluators. They got to do it within 2 weeks. And you unpack it, and it's like, if all they did was evaluate proposals for 8 hours a day, I'm sure we can come up with a number, but it's like, it actually only ends up being 4 minutes per proposal.
Yeah.
If you know that's the environment you're going into, maybe I get it. That is a good point on that slide about the significance of problem or opportunity. But we've got 7 slides in that specific section. And we got to tighten it up. I get it. You want to show off your team and you want to show 4 slides of different things you're capable of, but no one gives a crap about where you got your PhD or, any number of like qualifications, like, because it doesn't it doesn't go. Where do you put that? You've got 4 slides, and you want to show that your team's got a backbone. Maybe that's a technical merit piece, but like at the end of the day, what is it? What is it? If it's not highlighting what it is, I think you're doing a disservice to your technical merit section.
Well, I agree with what you just said, except for the piece on the like degrees and things, like where you got a degree from. Obviously, highlighting that does play into, at least it's supposed to, into the technical merit evaluation factor.
I don't think it does.
It does.
I don't think it does.
It does, 100%.
Okay.
It's supposed to.
Hey, Mark, write this down. I disagree. I'm not saying I won't put it there. I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, if you came from Carnegie Mellon and you're building an AI application, that shouldn't matter, as opposed to whether you came out of a community college or whatever else. But
right. Yeah. It plays into it's supposed to play into the technical merit as according to the RFP. Now,
and they're supposed to read the letters of support.
Right? Exactly.
Because if it did matter, I'll put it in the same category of letter of support. If it did matter, then freaking, hey, I got a letter of support from General So-and-so. He's the PO or whatever. No brainer, right? No, man, that General So-and-so has written millions of letters of support, and he's got the same win rate as everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, it just again, it depends on the evaluator. However, in the RFP, this is the point of this conversation, right? In the RFP, it talks about technical approach, the clarity of the problem statement, technical approach, soundness, technical merit, innovation of the proposed technical approach, its differentiation from current custom alternatives, includes the proposed PI, PM, supporting staff and consultants' qualifications to execute the proposed approach. So in theory, that PhD should help like substantiate, the technical merit that company is, coming in with, as opposed to someone that doesn't have a degree. Now you got, software developers out there, a lot of AI, data scientist type folks that, never got a degree. It happens. So that's a risk, in my opinion, putting those people up unless they have solved for cancer or something with AI. and then they can claim that kind of like a patent of some sort. But that stuff matters, and you know as well as I do, that plays into the culture of the Air Force, where education is hugely pushed, right? Like day one of getting in as a second lieutenant, oh, where are you at with your master's? Like that's literally the question you guys like you and I would get. Where are you at with your master's? I haven't even thought about it. I'm trying to figure out my job. Right. So, so it's all that to say, according to the letter of the law, it should matter. Again, cool. My take.
I'm glad we have come and we've got after the webinar to give the letter of the law. I'm telling you,
it matters. I'm telling you, Matt. And that's
I'm telling you, don't discard it. But I'm telling you, don't. But I mean, I agree with the premise of what you're saying. I guess if I'm thinking about, what's there's probably some other good examples of, maybe you could think about like the work plan or the transition strategy, which I think can be actually places of opportunity to differentiate. But at this point, if there's 1,200 proposals, 1,100 of them probably have the same exact work plan. Yeah. It's customer discovery,
right?
That should matter what you're actually going to do and how you unpack it. You're understanding, I don't, where, and then where do you put that transition strategy? Is that a commercialization piece, right? So you do have to kind of make decisions about, hey, where is it important to bring to life some more things, where more words might be helpful in order to tell a story, and where do you be like, all right, I got to check the box, I got to press.
Yeah.
And I know that every time we click submit on a proposal, I feel good about it. Hey, this could win, but that never stops us from when we go into the next round. Like if it was perfect, why are we changing anything? We always change something. We always bring something else to life to highlight.
Yeah.
Even with wins, but yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good enough discussion around evaluators. I think the last thing I would say about it is it is what it is, which is a terrible saying, but in terms of like, that's what you're dealing with. That's what you have. You can't change it. You can't trick the system. You can have discussions like we're having and be honest about what's important and what's not. And then ultimately you have to make a decision about what you put in there. And then understand that your results on a phase one, where, either the 20%, it's 20% to the masses, with the downtick in awards might even be lower this round. That doesn't dictate your future in what's possible in the defense environment. And as two guys that have obviously built companies around this, and we certainly aren't the only ones, I think of even venture capital groups that like stand up arms to like attack these phase ones. That means there's more work to do. So it's just kind of, hey, live in the game. There's an opportunity here. Do not miss the opportunity. But if this is if you're hanging everything on this opportunity, understand everything we just talked about. You have very little control over it. There's ways that there's absolutely ways that you can make sure, if it's a 15% to the masses, there's absolutely things where I can confidently say we can get you in that 40, 50, 60% range. But even then, there's no guarantees.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a quality of proposals and a numbers game. It's just a matter of the opportunities that you go after, you pursue, the quality of your content, assuming you've got good technology, which, most cases that's the case. You got a good team. Marrying those two things up is hard. Not every company has great tech and a great team. And so, but when you've got all those things, man, like, you go on those runs of just phenomenal wins, and you get on these runs of, man, we can't lose, because when you got a great team, it takes a team effort to get these things through. It really does. So okay, hey, did you want to is it too in the weeds to go into like the subcategories of the evaluation criteria, or how they score these things? Or I'd love to get your take on what you look at, like what matters to you. you know, because I think for me, especially defense need, I feel like I've got a good feel. Commercialization, I'd love to see what you do there because it's weighted equally. Like, what are some things that you really hang your hat on, especially in commercialization?
It's funny. So when you think about commercialization, one of the things that will get said is something like sales or pre-sales. Pre-sales is kind of funny to me because I'd love to be proven wrong, but that's not like it happens. It's not like it's a real thing, but in general, especially for startups, like that's not a common thing.
Right.
That's you're asking people to commit money to something that doesn't exist. Like I don't know who does that. Again, I've absolutely seen it, but it's not something that I think is worth spending a ton of effort. Like crap, if we're going to put it in a phase one, we better get pre-sales.
Yeah.
And so then if you just say, hey, okay, sales is really important. You're asking for, I would say TRL 1 is a little bit, sure, propose it, but it's like you might want to bring it to life a little bit more before you start putting a whole proposal together. But
like TRL like 1 to 3, that's going to basically be your kind of more basic research is my understanding of it, where AFWERX says all the time, we're not looking to fund basic research. We're looking to fund applied research, stuff that you can prototype in a phase 2 in a meaningful way. Right.
Yeah. That you bring up a good point, because the way AFWERX has decided to define, if you if you look at the SIBR program as a whole, so 3-phase program, phase 1 feasibility study, phase 2 prototype, and phase 3 is, I guess execution. There's probably a better word for it.
Operation,
delivery, whatever. Whether or not it actually plays out that way is sort of situational. But when you say, hey, customer discovery is your feasibility study, what it kind of leapfrogs the idea of determining whether or not it's even possible. I mean, you and I can come up with an idea right now of just like knowing the DoD, knowing the problems they face, and I want to come up with something. I'll think of something. But the point is like we don't even know if it's possible. Let's get satellites in the sky within 30 seconds. We'll build a launch system. That's probably a good example because you've seen those slingshot things. Like now we're gonna do it faster. We're gonna do it in 30 seconds, and it's gonna have no emissions in the atmosphere and da. Oh, great idea. Yeah, probably not possible. At least not in this lifetime.
That brings up a really good, interesting discussion point where it's like, at what point is a company like just clearly too early for Air Force open topic SIBR sitters? And maybe it's as simple as, TRL 1 to 3. Okay, you're not ready. Get to TRL 4. Maybe on your own dime, get it to some level of a prototype, or maybe if you're 3D printing this thing, like actually have a 3D print version of it, or whatever. Where would you say is like a clear delineation? And I know that's not an easy answer, but when you say, yeah, you're hot to trot for submitting a proposal for phase 1.
If I'm being honest, I have been part of building proposals on something that was in the back of a cocktail napkin and won them.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Knowing full well, like this is way too early, but hey, it's customer discovery.
Yeah.
Because this of course leads to the discussion of like, hey, the next logical step in this process is a phase 2, which should be building towards prototype. Realistically, you can't propose in your milestones the feasibility study. And I think that happens all the time. I think the Air Force is paying for feasibility studies with phase 2 money more often than we would even admit. And then I'll be on the other side where they're delivering commercially. Especially you think about software, those are really good examples of like there is an argument to be made like, hey, this is already being developed, being sent out commercially. Like, what's the R&D? And I think there's arguments to be made on both sides. One, there is no R&D, or two, the R&D is we got to figure out how to operate in this environment.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, and that I think that's eye-opening for probably a lot of people. What I've seen the most success with just over time on these phase ones, particularly phase ones, is when that company has either a significant investment, so at true tech startup, they're at least seed, probably around Series A, maybe Series B. When they're around there, man, they're doing really good. You know what I mean? Like, you can put a phase one proposal in, and they're gonna probably within 1 or 2 or 3 chances, probably gonna win one. I mean, most likely they will. And also the established small businesses that have a good product, they're already delivering, like they're gonna win one when it's established. That's what I've seen, and that's, typically where we mainly focus, I would say. I haven't seen too much like consistent success on the early side. But again, it comes down, just like John's point and your point, Brent, it comes down to that evaluator and what they find. Bring it back to that point, right? What they find compelling.
Well, and that's why I say, like, the PhD doesn't matter as much. I'm saying it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
As much as, like, what is it? What's the problem? Is there a market for it?
Yeah.
And I don't think evaluators in the whole give a rip where the TRL lies.
I think you're right. Some don't. Yeah.
And you could argue it's lower TRL level means you can say whatever you want because we're still building it.
Yeah.
Stir the pot, baby.
Stir of pots.
I'm just telling you right now that
it's true. I agree.
I'm not saying lie, but we think about developing a cost volume. You've got 2 guys that have developed something. Maybe they got some pre-seed funding. They're ready to go, but they know at some point they're going to need to hire an electrical engineer and a data analyst and all the stuff that happens. Those people exist? No, they don't exist at all. So you're actually proposing on something that you can't even build until you actually get the funding to build it. So you have to begin to make a lot of assumptions about it. And this is where I think about, cost volume is a good example because it's one of those things where it's like, think about the startup that's, again, got some pre-seed funding. I don't even know how those guys pay themselves half the time because they're putting it all towards research. Like they're on rice and beans for however long. And then they go ask them, hey, what's your rates? What's the rates for the PI? What's your overhead? What's your fringe? What's your G&A? And then they say, what's G&A? That crap doesn't exist. I'd argue for 90% of them, maybe more.
SpaceX doesn't even do that, right?
Absolutely. So, but you have to put something there. So what do we do? So this is how we talk about it amongst our teams and with our partners is like, hey, it needs to be defensible. Hey, what is the rate that's appropriate for that discipline? What are the amount of hours that will be appropriate? And come on, like you can unpack how many hours it's going to be. But so it's not lie. It's not, but it is make a decision. Yeah, and make it defensible. Help because the other side of it is if you go to the other side of it, because you could sit here and say, well, why do they even ask for it then? Well, because the contract officer's got to do something to determine that's fair and reasonable. Right. Hey, this is your taxpayer dollars. We actually have to tell a story about how it's being spent, and then, is anyone ever going to make you answer the mail on a firm fixed price contract that's $75,000? No, you'll never be audited. Knowing all those factors, do I think there's some nefarious stuff going on in this program? Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely, 1,000%. I argue, okay, well, we got to do. You could say, well, we got to do something about that, or you could say, hey, to be able to execute a program of this size and to be able to get new technology invited in here, we have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. I think it's a good calculated risk to say, hey, I think the cream will rise. We have to understand that there's a risk that there's going to be some nonsense because thinking about, you'd ask about commercialization. If you don't have sales, then what do you have? Like, well, let's talk about your investments. Yeah. Potential investments, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Who's going to stop you from saying, hey, we got a $15 million investment from Sequoia? Right. You never even talk to Sequoia. I don't ever check that. So just say whatever you want, right? Just win the thing. I mean, is that really happening? Oh my gosh, yes. Are we doing that? Of course not, because we know how to tell the story. And
Right.
it's like you have to figure out what it is. We don't have sales. Okay, what is it? Let's help them understand the market demand that's there, and then the steps that we've taken to help understand it, and yeah, da, da, da.
Yeah.
But and that's happening all over.
That brings in a good point. Is like, should there be someone on the back end that's like, hey, you said this in a proposal, and you know as well as I do, the corporate official for that company has to sign off before submitting, and there's the fraud, waste, and abuse training, so people know. And should there be someone on the back end looking into those things where it's like, oh, you said there's a $15 million investment from Sequoia or whoever, and hey, can you guys just send us some proof of that? It's like, holy smokes, like you just got awarded. I get it, $75,000, but you gotta catch it early before this thing kind of grows into something bigger, because you do that on a little thing, and of course it's going to turn into a big thing. I would hope the Air Force, OSI, DoD, I'm sure at large, is doing something like that, because that we need to be playing a fair game here, and I think we are. There's gonna be the one-offs for sure that are.
I think those are anomalies, but I think that you're. I love your optimism. That's why you're one of my favorite people. Your hairline and your optimism are the two things that I love the most about you.
You gotta have that, man. Like, there's got to be at least spot check it. You know what I mean? At least spot check it.
Yeah, spot check it in the 2-week contracting sprint when you're trying to award 300 contracts.
No, it'll be after the fact, right? It's after the fact. You get the thing awarded, and okay, let's spot check 10% of these and see.
Well, another example, and I don't disagree, but one of the things that I think that we have deployed is like a company that are raising a seed round. Hey, we're going to try to raise a $5 million seed.
Yeah.
Whether or not they actually do it, or if they
that's different
the timeline they want. So that's where it's like, so some of those, anyone that might listen to this or just think through it, and I know that we deal with this in our own portfolio. Hey, this is where we're at. Okay, well, what are your objectives? How are you going to fundraise?
Yeah,
we're just going to bootstrap the whole thing. Okay, you're going to siphon off of the entire SIBR program. Well, that's not going to work. So you almost have to like tease it out. Like there's a train, 3 trains.
And I'll jump in while that choo-choo train goes by. Is that's different than saying, yeah, we've raised, as opposed to, we plan to raise in the next. I mean, StratFi is very much set up like that, right? Where it's, you can get a StratFi, and then in the next 24 months, plan to raise your next round or whatever. As long as you got that on your strategic company plan or whatever, like. And AFWERX is totally okay with that, because we're planning to raise and we're projecting that out. To say, oh, we have raised, again, we're just talking a hypothetical right now. That's totally different, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's a spectrum, right? You say nothing. Hey, we have no commercialization or demand signals, which is just, I can't think of anyone that's done it in phase 1. But remember in phase 2, when that last section, they would ask like those 12 questions in the phase 2s, and they would say, what's your revenue, or what's your revenue over the past 12 months? And then, we're working with a client, and they'd write, we are pre-revenue. And I'm like,
right.
That's it? This is an opportunity to say, why are you pre-revenue?
Right.
Pre-revenue here, but this is, we're going to hit this milestone, and we're in discussions here. Help tell the story. That's
where I think bringing it back to how you tell that story. I know we got on a little tangent on OSI coming to check your stuff, but like, bringing it back on telling that story, so that it's not just a simple no, or 0, right? Like, that's probably one of the worst things you could do, is put 0, because then that's telling absolutely nothing to the evaluator. And my take is, you got to wow that evaluator at every section of the tech volume. You have to wow them. Like, if that simple no does not wow them, now there's space for issues or whatever that you got to be cognizant of. But if they flip and they read a paragraph and they're not wowed, then you're probably going to lose the thing. That's the take I go in with.
What's the best possible light you can explain the circumstance?
Right.
Saying you're pre-revenue, or you have 0 investment, or we're bootstrapping, or my grandma gave me 10 grand, whatever the thing is, like, that's not the best possible light.
Yeah.
If you're part of an accelerator, bring that to life.
Yes.
There's just a lot there you can do.
This is very much my space because I've got the questions here that I'm asking and I want to tease out of you. I know normally like to drive this thing because you are a podcast legend in the space.
Yeah,
So
it's in my blood.
But because I look at this stuff and I sort of geek out on it. Let me ask you this, and we've talked about this before, and I know we only got about 8 minutes left here. Okay, knowing that the evaluation factors are equally weighted.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Air Force racks and stacks all of those proposals that get excellent, which by the way, only those ones are going to get funded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they said how many proposals in SBIRs did they say? 200 and something, right? So if there's 216, okay. So if there's 217 that have excellent, how then do they determine which ones of the 216 out of 217 are going to get awarded? I
know what point you're trying to make because you're trying to paint yourself in a positive light because you and I have debated this previously. You're trying to set me up to compliment you, and I'm not going to take the bait.
I would never do that.
Trade secret. How about that? Trade secret. If for the low price of $10,000 a month, I will tell you the answer to that. But no, I'm just kidding. That it is relevant.
It is relevant. And feel free to not answer that, by the way, because you and I both have
it's in the solicitation
a strategy. Yeah,
we do have a strategy. I'll say this: there was a time when I don't think, even though it's always been in there, there was a time when it did not matter, and the factor that you're referring to, and that factor is price. There was a time when price didn't matter.
Because there wasn't that much competition.
There wasn't enough. So that line wasn't there. There were no kidding. And I don't know if it happens every round, but you have to assume that it does. There's going to be more excellence across the board than there are going to be number of awards available.
You have to assume
so the line is going to have to get drawn at some point. And by the letter of the law, they can't say, well, okay, let's just see who has the strongest defense need then. Right. Or like they can't, they've already evaluated it.
Yeah.
So when the technical evaluation cannot determine, who wins, so to speak, then price becomes a factor. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? That's up for you to decide. I think you and I probably deploy similar ideas, but also different at the same time. Yeah. It's something worth thinking about. Yeah. I would say in general, I think it's still not. What you don't want to hear is well, shoot, then I just want to have the opportunity to be ready for a phase 2. I'll just propose 10 grand,
right?
Or I'll take a loss on it. I'll propose $100. Mm-hmm. That is not what we are saying. And I am a little reluctant to go even much further because this is one of those things where I think that we've found an edge, so to speak, and it's nominal. I mean, it's negligible what that edge is, because I think that, to your point, if it's 216 awards, I'd say at most it's going to be 250 excellence across the board at most. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about maybe 10%, 10-20% loss. But that matters
big time.
Yeah.
No, that's a good discussion point that I don't think. Even when we were talking about this 3 years ago, I definitely had a stance 3 years ago on this, and whether it came into account or not, I'll never know. But it's like, okay, by the letter of the law, this is how they have to evaluate an award, and so let's play that game, and then it's just a numbers game over the long run. So, so I agree. I don't. For my clients, I will say, hey, this is what we'll do, right?
Yep.
I mean, you and me, we'll talk about that, right? But for, there's got to be, that's a little bit of the inside baseball that you and I kind of employ for our clients. And so, I can respect that approach. So,
well, I think the big piece here is you got to read the damn solicitation. Yeah. You just gotta, and it's all there. And I would say there's less contradictions than there's been in the past. They're still there. So you have to figure out what question to ask. And of course, that's why we exist. This is
exactly.
I can't imagine being a founder, new to the space, trying to penetrate the defense market and trying to go it alone and like having to like enter into this world. We can zip through it very quickly, see the differences, know what we're looking for, and execute on it. If you were starting it from scratch, I mean, it's almost like everyone needs to go to Merco, AC 101.
Funny story. Yeah. Funny story. I might get a chance to speak over there. So.
Oh, you don't say. Molding the minds of the future officers.
Help shape and form the young contracting professionals that are coming in. So we'll see. So still working through logistics.
I hope you bring something edgy.
I know you love
POB textbook.
I'm gonna be like, all right, the RFP says da 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 da.
You are contracting officers. You are the tip of the spear. Without you, there wouldn't be a single warhead on a forehead.
That's right. You could go to jail if you do something wrong.
Oh, do something dramatic. Pull out some handcuffs. You want to be in these? You want to be in these?
That's right.
Okay, then read your FAR. It's all in there.
All right. Who could quote FAR part 15 dot da 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 da? Fail.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, man.
Well, good stuff. Hey, I got a lot to do. I'm very busy today. Very busy today. But this is, as always, been a fun discussion. Hopefully helpful to somebody. We've had as many as 11 viewers. I think we got
beautiful
6 right now, which is probably our team. But nonetheless, good fun discussion. Yeah. Any closing thoughts?
No, none at all, man. No, it's good time catching up with you.
Hey, we're off next week because I'm gonna be gone. 4th train, unbelievable. Okay. So people be. I mean, I hopefully you're feeling the heat. We're talking about. Let's see, Go Team. Look at Brandon. Go Team. It's my guy. I wonder if anyone from Sightline's ever going to show up here.
They stay heads down working, man.
They're working. Yeah, you don't let them. You don't let them come up for air.
No, they like just getting in the trenches with clients. That's what we're all about over here, Brent.
Wow. 20 days, 22 hours, and 0 minutes.
Oh man,
that's what we're looking at. So
all right, so we're shooting for the 3rd. So that'll be the week before closing, right? The next time we do this.
Yeah.
The week before closing. So that'll be good times. Just kind of get the last minute stuff out. Talk through it. Maybe answer any last minute questions. That's right.
I mean, let's just go all day.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I better hop.
Hey, I got things to do. Have a good day.
A lot of work to do. We'll see you, man.